Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris Blurred, and I'm here with my special guest, Russ Tanner. And Russ, it's such a pleasure to have you on tonight. Such great information. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, likewise, it's great to have updates, and I hope to have you back ever so often, every few months here and there, just to get updates on what's happening insofar as chemtrails go and everything else that's happening. And so if somebody has a sensitivity to chemtrails, how would they be able to tell?
Well, there are if somebody has a sensitivity and they're not able to smell and taste them, as most people can't, although there are a large number of people who can, and more people are becoming. As they become more toxic, we find that people tend to be able to smell and taste them more and more as they become more toxic. Mm-hmm. But I would look for symptoms. There are so many symptoms too that chemtrails cause, and let me go through some of the list. The first, excuse me, these are what I call the big four. And these are major symptoms that are caused by the spraying and the breathing of nanoparticulate aluminum and other metals is aneurysms, strokes, heart attacks, and cancer. And we will see that these health issues, along with respiratory issues, have been on a very, very sharp increase over the last many years, several years since the spraying has started. Aneurysms and strokes can be caused because these tiny particulates build up in capillaries and can block capillaries and cause blockages in arteries over time. Heart attacks can be caused because barium, which is one of the large, very popular components in the spraying, barium is actually, people don't realize this, but barium is used to artificially induce heart attacks in laboratory animals. Mm. And the reason is it's because barium rapidly depletes the potassium in your body, and your heart needs potassium to beat. And when your potassium gets too low, you will have a heart attack. First, you'll have heart fibrillations. Your heart won't beat correctly, and then eventually it'll lead to a heart attack. Mm. This actually happened to me in 2011. I had a heart attack. Mm. And I went to the emergency room in an ambulance. First time in my life I ever had an ambulance ride. I thought I was going to die. To make a long story short, after 4 days of testing, they found nothing functionally wrong with my heart except one thing. I was very, very low in potassium. And incidentally, the 2 previous days I had been sprayed very, very heavily in the Bangor, Maine area where I lived, and was not able to protect myself with a wet mask, and also had some tea that had caffeine in it, and caffeine can also deplete your electrolytes. And the combination of tea, the very heavy exposure, not being able to protect myself, caused a depletion of potassium, and my potassium was very, very low, and they had to give me these big pills to bring back my potassium. And I would ask people, do you have headaches that just suddenly appear through the day? Like you don't smell the trail. People have to visualize as the trails are sprayed, these plumes will descend on you, and the intensity will go up within 2 minutes. It'll become full intensity. This is generally how it happens, and then it will dissipate over 45 to 90 minutes slowly. So if you were to graph the intensity of these plumes as they descend, it looks like a square wave usually, or a sawtooth wave. For people know what that is, it's like it suddenly increases within 2 minutes, and then it takes 45 to 90 minutes to decrease in intensity. So I would ask you, do you suddenly have headaches that come on you during the day and then they dissipate, and then 2 hours later, when another plume descends on you, you have another headache and it goes away? Or is this something that people find happening? A lot of people find themselves waking up every 2 hours throughout the night. I'm hearing this from a lot of people. They don't know why. Mm-hmm. Well, see, the plumes, when they descend on me, they wake me right up. Mm-hmm. But I know that there's a plume on me at that time because I can smell and taste it. But for a person who cannot smell and taste it, they'll just wake up and they really won't know why. And here are some of the other. Here's a quick list of the most common symptoms also that are associated with these metals, these nanoparticulates, very small particulates that we're breathing. Besides the fact that we scientifically know that they shorten your lifespan, so you've already lost years of your life if you live on planet Earth because of this, or at least in the northern hemisphere of planet Earth. They cause fatigue. They can make you feel very fatigued and sleepy, tired. Of course, headaches, I just mentioned, sinus pain, muscle pain from inflammation, joint pain from inflammation, make your joints actually crack. Like you can crack your joints. It makes the the fluid and the gas in your joints build up, so you have to crack your joints. Depression, insomnia, anxiety, anger issues, inability to concentrate. Your thoughts will loop. You might have songs running through your head over and over that you can't get out. You walk into the kitchen for something, you can't remember why you did that. Salty metallic taste in the air for those who have a sensitive sense of taste. Chemical taste in the air, sometimes depending on which type of plume they're spraying. We've isolated 10 different types now, which I can get into if you want later on. Swelling, general swelling, inflammation, puffiness. If your face is all puffy, you wake up in the morning, you don't know why you have inflammation. Morgellons disease, of course, you have teeth, teeth rotting at the gum line, or filaments that are coming out of your skin, which is Morgellons. Ringing in the ears, which is a mercury issue. Changes in your eyesight. If you're becoming farsighted or nearsighted and you can't focus on things that are near your eyes. Upper respiratory infections, elevated blood pressure is very common with a type of chemtrail we call the metallic chemical type. That causes a rapid increase in blood pressure, which can be very dangerous and cause fibrosis in your capillaries and can lead to serious problems later on. Accelerated heartbeat, heart pain because of inflammation or because of low potassium that's depleted by the barium. Shortness of breath, loss of your balance, vertigo, dark circles under your eyes, stomach pain, which is very commonly associated with barium, nausea, frequent illness because both barium, aluminum, and mercury all suppress the immune system in all different ways. So your immune system is very suppressed. You get illness much more frequently than you used to. Difficulty achieving deep sleep cycles. This is another mercury symptom. Mercury, especially when it's mercury alone, will partially keep you out of deep sleep cycles. But if you combine mercury with B vitamins, which you might find in honey, or if you're taking B vitamin supplements, if you take those later in the day, or if you have sugar and caffeine. So mercury mixed with B vitamin, sugar, or caffeine will prevent you from achieving deep sleep cycles. So people can experiment and avoid those things for the second half of the day and see if their sleep is any better. And also very vivid and restless dreams. You wake up feeling exhausted. So this is a handful of symptoms that you can experience from the plumes that you're breathing.
That's not good, and that's quite a bit there. That's quite the list.
Yeah, that's a pretty big list, and there's more, but this is the most common list.
Right. And what about blood clots? Is that included also, or no?
Well, in a sense, yes, because aluminum, nanoparticle aluminum is known scientifically to actually build up in your capillaries, especially, and it will cause blockage and can lead to a stroke or aneurysm. So it's a very serious thing. In fact, I know I have a friend who works for the state for the government in a certain state. I won't tell the state or get into details, but this friend of mine experienced an extremely heavy day of spraying. 3 people in the office had strokes at the same time.
Oh, wow. They
had 3 ambulances and had to take 3 people to the hospital at the same time during this incredibly hard day of spraying.
Oh, my goodness. Yes,
very
horrible. And when you're taking the potassium, do you actually take that with the magnesium?
Yeah, that would be a good idea, yes. In fact, what I would do, and this is what I do because I can feel when they're spraying real hard, I can feel my heart start missing a few beats, and I can feel the pain starting to set in. So what I do is I'll take 1,000 milligrams of potassium and, maybe 500, 1,000 milligrams of magnesium as well. And also what I add with that is taurine. I'll take 1,500 milligrams of taurine. And the reason I take taurine is an amino acid that helps your heart hold on to the electrolytes. So it holds on to the potassium and the magnesium and keeps the balance. So taurine is really effective at helping the potassium and magnesium be properly utilized and balanced by the heart. But potassium is really, really important, though. If you're having heart fibrillations, check with your health practitioner about consider taking potassium. One thing I will warn people is the government years ago, and I'm sure they did this to deter the people from taking enough potassium, is the FDA, you can't get over-the-counter potassium in amounts over 99 milligrams per capsule anymore, okay, which is really ridiculous because, you can take 1,800, 1,900 milligrams at a time, which means at today's doses, 99 milligrams per capsule, you could take, 19 capsules and still be within the safe limits of potassium. And in fact, I take 8 or 10 capsules at a time. I take 800 to 1,000 milligrams of potassium at a time. Your body is very good at regulating potassium and utilizing potassium. Mm-hmm. And in being assaulted with barium, you need a lot of potassium. So I would always, if you're a prepper, if you're preparing for hard times in the future, I would stock up on potassium and keep a large supply on hand. Don't take too much. I mean, usually it's recommended you don't take more than about 4,800 milligrams a day. That's 4.7 grams a day. And it's recommended you don't take more than 1.8 gram, which is 1,800 milligrams at a time. Although I've taken significantly more than that at a time, and was perfectly fine. In fact, I felt very good afterward. I felt surprisingly good, but I don't recommend that. That's not recommended that you do more than that at a time. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, potassium is real critical because of the assault that we're having with barium.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, it sounds like it really screws with the electrical circuitry in the body, Yeah,
it really does. I mean, barium is a paralytic. Mm-hmm. Barium will, because of the way it affects your nervous system can lead to paralysis. So, we never should be breathing. We're never intended to breathe. There's no beneficial function for barium or aluminum in the human body, or mercury. So these things that are being sprayed on us should never have been. We should never be exposed to these things.
Mm-hmm. I very much agree. And also, there is mention of nanoparticles. Is that correct?
There is a lot of mention of nanoparticles. Now, some people will say that we don't really have evidence that there are nanoparticles or not. What we do know is that particles are small enough to go through HEPA filters. That's very clear and been well demonstrated, which means that they're smaller than 3 microns. So the particles are very, very small. Whether they qualify to be nano or not, that's debatable. But what we do know is they're extremely small, and HEPA filters are useless against them. So they're very, very small particles. And we do know that the smaller the particle and the more numerous the particle in the air, the more years will be removed from the end of your lifespan. Mm-hmm. So this is one reason why people should be concerned, because it affects everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody. And even children, I would imagine. But what about Morgellons now? This is associated and connected to Morgellons disease. Is that correct?
Yes. Clifford Carnicom, for those people, I would encourage people to look him up, is doing groundbreaking work. He is probably the leader in Morgellons research, and he has made some very powerful connections that pretty conclusively show that the particulates that are coming from these jets are the cause of Morgellons. Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, Morgellons is a very mysterious and strange disease that causes terrible fatigue, in other symptoms, but the real identifying symptoms from them in this disease is filaments that grow out of your skin. And these filaments appear to be like artificial, kind of like polyester material. And this is very strange. I know for those who are not familiar with this sounds very, very bizarre, and it is extremely bizarre. But there appear to be some type of organisms that many believe, and with very strong evidence, are nano artificial organisms of some sort that actually produce these filaments. There is a theory that these filaments are actually being produced by fly larvae that go in the skin. So it's a whole different school of thought. There are two different schools of thought that dominate the field of Morgellons right now. One is, the artificial organism theory that producing the filaments. The other one is a fly larva, a type of fly that produces these. So it's being debated right now. The other thing is that at the root of your teeth, and a lot of people are experiencing this now, is you're seeing decay in your teeth right at the gum line, this dark-colored decay. And this is becoming more and more pronounced in people. I've heard from more and more people who are experiencing this. Even if you don't have the filaments, this is another symptom that's associated with Morgellons disease.
It's just terrible. And where are most of those cases located? Do you know? Is it in the U.S. or outside the country? Or
most of the ones that we know about in the United States, we have a lot in Texas, Florida, Maine, California. They're kind of spread all over, but it seems like there may be some clusters in places like Texas and Florida. I believe California, and those are probably places that are being more heavily sprayed.
Right, I'm thinking coastlines, too. Maybe it has something to do with the water.
Possibly.
Yeah,
it's very mysterious. It's very mysterious, and I can't help myself to believe that it is some kind of artificial situation, because this is not, because it's new. The whole phenomenon is new, and the filaments that are coming out appear to be like a polyester material or some kind of an artificial, man-made material. It's just very, very bizarre.
Yeah, it's like one big petri dish experiment, and everybody's a test subject for something. Outrageous.
Yeah. I mean, we know, this gets into a very strange area, and this is, I've researched this stuff for a long time, and for those who are educated about this, it's much easier to swallow. For those who are brand new, if you're brand new and you're hearing this information, it sounds like science fiction. But there's a group of people who are trying to control the world. The very, very powerful power brokers have done a very effective job at altering history and making people believe things that aren't true, and controlling mainstream media. And they're right now performing their final great power grab to set up a new world order. They call it, those are their words, not my words, they call it a new world order, but a centralized government. And part of doing that is they have to fatigue the public. This is right from their own literature. They have to exhaust the public through diseases, through intoxication. And this is exactly what they're doing. And I think Morgellons is part of that whole formula of control.
Exactly. Well, and I know, coming from my spectrum of psychotronic weapons and things like that I've been exposed to, I'm well aware of what they're capable of, which is never a positive thing. Everything is weaponized. I mean, anytime they get their hands on something, it's weaponized. So. Yeah,
and it's all about control. This is the thing, is that power begets power. They want power. I don't care about power. I like to have a little bit of influence in the world because I want to do some good. So that's where my high comes from. That's where I feel like I'm doing something worthy of living. That's what makes life worth living for me.
Right.
But unfortunately, what people need to realize is there's a whole group of people out there who thrive off of power. And so they will do what you say, is they weaponize everything they get their hands on, and these weapons are used ultimately for control, so that they can control people, they can control what you think, they can control how you feel. And we know now through the patents that have been exposed and the research that have been exposed over the last 40, 50 years that you can make people have to urinate, you can make people have sexual feelings, you can make people make them feel very, very fatigued, very, very excited. You can make them feel angry by exposing them to certain frequencies of electromagnetic waves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is just the elementary stuff. Who knows where the research is at today? This is stuff they were doing decades ago.
Right. Yeah. Then there's the transhumanism agenda, which I always mention because that dovetails right into it.
That's right. Transhumanism is a very, very frightening prospect where, for those who don't know, where we're joining man and machine, basically, in a sense. You're transcending humanism, I guess you would say. I personally really like, the way our bodies are put together, and I don't like the idea. And of course, these things are all looked at as improvements, but we already know. Here's what happens when you try to, people like, I guess, Ray Kurzweil, and other gurus like this are trying to sell transhumanism as something that's really beneficial to society. But things like the microchip, the RFID chip that goes on your skin, well, now we know it causes cancer. All these other agendas towards transhumanism, when you look at what's behind them, they try to sell them to the public as something that's going to help you, help your memory, help your vision, help this. But what it really does is it becomes a mechanism for control. And if people want an illustration for this, it's kind of like your car. You've got a computer in your car, and the computer was sold to the public as an idea to improve the performance of your car, improve gas mileage, make it easy to work on, be self-diagnostic. Aren't those all wonderful, beautiful things? But what's happening now is the computer is being used to convict you because it tracks you by GPS where you go, what time you went there, how fast you were going, and now the computer is tracking information about you and invading your privacy. And this is exactly where transhumanism is going, is that will be sold to you as a box of goods that is beneficial for you, but in the end, it's really all about control.
Oh, absolutely. Enslaving people, without a doubt.
Yep.
Yep, without a doubt on that. And it reminds me of that movie, The Black Hole by Disney. I don't know if you ever saw that. It's real old and cheesy, but, the guy, do you remember that movie?
No, I didn't see it, no.
It was a long, long time ago, but anyway, there was this bad scientist who had these drone-like machines they used to be people, but then then he did some kind of a surgery with them, and now they were all empty, like robotic units. That's what it reminds me of, actually, when I think about that, but anyways, I didn't mean to go off on that level, but, it is the same parallel. When you think about all this, and also you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to kind of ask you, these planes fly at a higher altitude now to kind of deploy their chemtrails opposed to a lower altitude, is that right?
That's right. I lived in Jamestown, New York when I first saw chemtrails being sprayed, and what happened is after a couple of years of spraying, and it was horrible for me because I could smell and taste, and my whole life changed. My health declined rapidly. In fact, I ended up moving away from there because of it. What happened is they actually stopped spraying for 4 days, all of a sudden, just stopped spraying. And this was after 2 years of spraying every single day, low altitude, and there were never low altitude planes over Jamestown because Jamestown, New York, their airport is too small to handle large aircraft. They can only handle what we call puddle jumpers, just the real small aircraft and the prop aircraft. So you never see aircraft flying low over Jamestown at all. You maybe once in a while would see something really, really high that's going to Erie, Pennsylvania, or Buffalo, but nothing low. But all of a sudden they started in November 2005 is when I started seeing them crisscross the sky and make the grids. Well, after a couple of years, they suddenly had a 4-day break where they had no trails, and I was thinking, the nightmare might be over. I was so hopeful. The 5th day, all the jets came back, same schedules because they were on schedules, the same intensity of nasty metallic chemical taste in the air. But the only thing that changed is all the trails, with the exception of about 4 to 6 days a month, all the trails were short, non-persistent, and being sprayed at a higher altitude. Why? Probably to keep it from the public. Now, if that wasn't enough, I ended up moving to Bangor, Maine area, specifically to get away from the spraying. It had affected my health so badly, I didn't know how much longer I would live. It was horrible. It was a nightmare for me. And they were spraying less in Bangor. Well, they picked that up. Soon after I moved there, they started spraying harder and harder. I certainly don't think it was because of me. I think that they were picking up cities one by one as they're getting the equipment manufactured and implemented that they need to do the spraying. So they started spraying in Bangor harder and harder. And the same thing happened, except there wasn't a 4-day break. They actually, overnight, they went from covering the sky, completely covering the sky every single day, to the next day, all the trails were short, non-persistent trails, with the exception of 4 to 6 days a month, and they were spraying at higher altitudes. And I wrote an article about this, and I believe that they're doing this. I hear this from people all over the world. This is happening in more and more cities, one by one by one by one. They're making the trails harder to see. They're less persistent. They're spraying at higher altitudes. But let me tell you, as someone who can smell and taste them, they are no less intense. So they're obviously upgrading their equipment to make the trails less persistent, so they're less noticeable from the public. I think that's really what the goal is in doing that.
Tacky. And these pilots obviously know what they're doing. I mean, it's not like they cannot know that they're dispersing this stuff, right?
I don't think they can not know. I mean, my best guess, because we really, of course, don't know what they are being told, but they're probably being told that this is some kind of benefit, to the world. Maybe they're being told it's, humanity is going to die if we don't do that. Who knows what they're being told. Maybe they're being told that it's to help the Fukushima radiation, or they're being told it's for global warming or some other thing like that. I don't know. But they obviously have got to know that there's particulates are being dispersed. I really can't see that they wouldn't know that.
Oh yeah, I mean you can see them, especially where I live. I get slammed with them all the time, and I think I've mentioned to you before. I live up around 8,400 feet, So it's really frustrating when you see these things everywhere, and I'm sure everybody else gets pretty frustrated. And that's what I mean. I can't imagine people not noticing this because it's right in your face. I mean, you'd have to be just completely oblivious not to notice this stuff.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many people are oblivious in the public.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
Yeah.
The thing I want to tell people, I wrote an article about a year ago. It's actually been made into a video now. It's been reprinted on websites. It was just translated into German. So this article is starting to grow some legs of its own, which I'm very glad to hear. But the article is basically shows people that high bypass turbofans, which are the types of engines that are used on all your large commercial jets and all your large military jets, do not produce trails, period. They don't produce condensation trails. And the reason that's so important is because that is the lie that is being told by mainstream media in perfect uniformity, and is being now taught in the textbooks and in the school system, in the public school system. They're all being taught that these trails coming out of the jet engines are condensation. That is an absolute bold-faced lie. These engines burn jet fuel, which is essentially kerosene. They produce a little bit of a black soot, which you will see when they take off. If you go to an airport and you see the jets take off, you look carefully, you see a little bit of a black soot coming out of these engines. You don't see condensation coming out of these engines. And the reason is because they don't produce enough condensation to be visible. They produce very little condensation because they're very efficient, and the vast majority of the air that gets pushed through never is combusted. Basically, people don't realize is that a high bypass turbofan is essentially a prop engine with a turbine in the middle that is actually turning the propeller. The reason you don't see a propeller is because it's in a tube. And that's why these engines are actually called ducted turbofans. And what the word ducted means is that the prop that's turning in the front. And if you look at the front of a jet engine of these high bypass turbofans, it's on any of your commercial jets like a Airbus 330 or a 737, Boeing 737, 747, or any of the series of Boeing engines, or any of these commercial jets, they all use high bypass turbofans. If you look in the front, you'll see that big fan that turns. Well, the majority of air that goes through that engine is pushed right out the back and is not combusted. It's just pushed through the engine. It's a prop engine. It's just in a duct. That's why it's called a ducted turbofan, because it's really pushing using a fan. That's the word fan. The big spinning blades you see in the front is the fan, and that fan pushes the air through the engine, just like a prop engine. And it's called a ducted turbofan because it's in a duct, which is what the big circle that surrounds the fan is. That's what it's called, is a duct. Just like there's ducts in your house that carry the air, the central air to their vents from the fan to the vent. It's a duct that carries air. The reason it's in a duct is because it's more efficient that way. So, but the bottom line is you're essentially using a prop engine, and then you have a turbine in the middle. A turbine is an engine that actually uses combustion that pushes air very quickly through little blades that spins, and it achieves very, very high rotational rates. And that's where you get the turbo part of it, because it's a turbine engine. But the vast majority of air that goes through a ducted turbofan engine, which all your commercial jets and all your large military jets use, the vast majority of the air is just blown through by a propeller, by a fan. They do not produce trails. They just don't produce trails. And there may be very, very rare circumstances where at high altitudes, under very rare atmospheric conditions, you might have something a little bit visible come out, but it's so rare that most people will never see them. That's why myself, and this is really, really important for people to realize, people who are sky watchers like myself, I've watched the sky since I was a kid. I've always loved jets. I always thought jet engines were the coolest technology ever made. Never saw a trail come out of a jet. If I had ever seen a trail come out of a jet, I would think it was on fire. There was something seriously wrong with the engine because they don't produce trails. So if you see a trail coming out of an engine on a large jet, on a large plane, it's an aerosol. It's not condensation.
And the fact of the matter is it sticks in the atmosphere. I mean, it doesn't dissipate.
Right. I mean, even if it does dissipate, and like I just said a minute ago about how now the new trend is to fly at a higher altitude, and all the trails are non-persistent.
Right.
But yes, I mean, we've seen for years, and this should raise questions. What you just said should raise questions in the minds of the public. Why were these trails so thick that they were just saturating the atmosphere to the point where in 2010 the Bangor Globe did an article saying that we had the dimmest summer in history because it was overcast every day. But you know what? The overcast was not caused by natural weather conditions. It was caused by the jets.
Exactly.
And I watched this because I was doing 3 years of almost continuous time lapse during that time, and that's what they do. This overcast condition was caused by the jets, and it should raise some eyebrows in the public if the public was paying attention based on what you just said. The public should be asking the question: why all of a sudden are all these trails now short? What happened?
Yeah.
In some areas, it's not happening everywhere, but in city after city across the United States and Europe, the trails are becoming short.
And you know what? I go out and I'll see the sunlight for just a little while. It'll be a beautiful blue sky, and by noon it's saturated with grids of white chemtrails everywhere.
Yes, and by doing the time lapse that I did, what people will notice from the time lapse, go online and look up time lapse, or go to the Global Skywatch YouTube account and look up the time lapse. I have lots and lots of time lapse posted up there. In fact, I'm posting more and more all the time because I have people who are submitting it to me to be posted. What you'll see is these even the non-persistent trails that are sprayed at higher atmospheres at higher altitudes, the particulates descend, and what happens is there's layers of warm air where the air temperature changes, and those layers are very well defined in the atmosphere. And what happens is those particulates descend, they will come to a warm layer, and they will pull cold air down into the warm layer. And they themselves, the particulates, will be cold. And so what they will do is they will cause condensation to form in that warmer layer, just like you would if you had like a cold glass and you blew your breath, your warm, moist breath against the cold glass. And it condenses water on the outside of the glass. In the same way, condensation forms when these cold particulates bring the cold air down into the warm layer. In fact, that's typically how you have the clouds form, except it's the opposite way. You have the warm air being thrust up in the cold layer, and then it forms cumulus clouds. Really nice. They're beautiful. Cumulus clouds are very well-defined structure, and they're very beautiful in their appearance. Well, here what you have is you have almost like a stratus cloud type of formation where you just have the whole sky becomes gray. And it's a combination of the particulates and the condensation that is being formed as these particulates fall through the warmer air layer, and it just covers the sky with a complete gray, overcast sky. And this happens over and over again. So even the short, non-persistent trails can still induce that because the particulates falling down into the warm layers of air.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really horrible. I just love the sunlight, and it's so sad to see this happening right now. The whole atmosphere just changed the way it is. And for our listeners who are familiar with your website, Global Skywatch, let's talk about that a little bit. And when was it founded, and what can people do to get involved? Like I said before, I love the site, and it's awesome.
Well, thank you. I would encourage people to go check out globalskywatch.com. That is our website, and look at the top. There are a lot of items in the menu at the top, and click on the item that says how to get involved. And that's right in the center top under there's 5 columns across the top: information, community, activism, reference, and about us. And the center column is activism, and under that, the very top item is how to get involved. And I hope for people who want to see this stop that the people would click on that and see what they can do, But also there's a lot there. There's forums for literally hundreds of cities around the world, for individual cities that have activist groups who want to share information or pictures or coordinate their protests or efforts. If you have a city that's not represented in the forum, just email us and we'll create that city for you so you have a place where all your people can coordinate. We have a ton of reference information about atmospheric photography websites, NOAA, NASA, imaging, traffic reports. You can even get shirts and signs for your yard, bumper stickers. There are many special features. Some musicians like Merle Haggard actually has a song called what I hate, and he mentions I hate chemtrails. Merle Haggard, for those who don't know, is a classic country music legend, and he has chemtrails, and there's a number of other artists who are now writing about this issue. And so if you click on the special features item, we have a bunch of music videos and things in there. And it's a very large website. There's all kinds of information, reference information, very, very large forum. And so I invite people to come check it out and get an education about this issue and share it with other people.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. It's a great website. Did you put that together yourself?
Yes, I did.
You did a fabulous job. Very impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
so
a
much.
website. It's really good. I mean, very detailed. I was really liking what I saw. So, yeah, I highly recommend everybody checks it out. I did put it in the chat room, so everybody has access to it in there as well. So that'd be good. And what have you heard about the honeybees? I know we talked about that the last time you were on my show. Any new information?
Here's what I believe. I saw the honeybees. I saw honeybees die, and I saw ladybugs die. And I'll explain what I mean by that to people. Is the mainstream media, and this is mainstream media against spreading propaganda, they're saying that the honeybees are dying because there's a certain class of pesticides that do a certain thing, and they have very good, clever stories that get in detail about how it kills the bees. And there may be some truth to the fact that these do kill bees. But here's what I witnessed myself, and I believe this to be a cover story, this story about the pesticide killing off all the bees. Is when I lived in Jamestown, New York. Jamestown, New York, in that whole area, western New York, is almost like a rainforest. They get a lot of precipitation because an hour to the west is Lake Erie, and a tremendous amount of water comes up off Lake Erie and it gets dropped east of Lake Erie, and Jamestown is east of Lake Erie, and that's why that area gets so much snow. That's why Buffalo gets so much snow, for instance, because Buffalo is east of the lake as well. So they get what's called lake effect snow, and they also get a lot of rain. So it's very lush, and there are bees all over the place. In fact, in the house I lived in, you could go outside and you would hear in the summertime a hum just everywhere. In the area where I was, there was just a hum, and you couldn't walk out in my lawn without shoes on because you would step on bees. There were just that many. They're all over the place. It was very rich, very lush, beautiful. When the spraying began every day in 2005, that next summer, you could hardly find a bee. The hum was gone. The bees were gone for the first time ever, the very next summer. Now, that happened in Jamestown, New York. I moved to Bangor, Maine to get away from the chemtrails, and of course they started spraying there heavily shortly after that anyway, so I didn't really get away from it, unfortunately. But what happened there is I moved into a house that had in it, and this is a little strange, but it had a ladybug colony. And there were hundreds and hundreds of ladybugs. And this house was built in the early 1800s. And I did not know when I moved to this house that it had a ladybug colony in it, so it took some getting used to. But basically, the ladybugs would leave you alone, and there'd be hundreds of ladybugs in all the rooms in the house, and they would kind of hang out in the corner of your ceiling, where your ceiling meets your wall up there. So they kind of left you alone, But they would migrate there, and it was really fascinating because they would all be in the house, and they would be there through the winter, and then a certain day, like in the late winter, they would all suddenly, you'd go to bed and you'd wake up the next morning, they'd all be gone. And so they all, it's kind of like other things in nature. They have a built-in time clock,
Right.
And they all do their thing. They all go into their mode where they do their thing and get ready for spring. So they would all disappear. Well, what happened after the spraying began? There were 2 weeks where the spraying was very, very heavy during the following summer. And during this 2 weeks, it was so bad. That's when I finally started calling the state of Maine because I got really upset because I could hardly function. It was so bad during this 2 week period. And hundreds and hundreds of ladybugs fell dead on the floor. And ever since, there's been hardly, you're lucky to go around the house and find the ladybug. The colony that's been there ever since people can remember in that house, because it's kind of a famous house. It used to be the general store out there where I live, because I live in a rural area outside Bangor, Maine. There's always been a colony in there. It's been kind of known for that. People have realize. It's a little strange, but again, it's been there for a long, long time. No more. No more. Ever since they were killed off during that 2 weeks of spraying, they've never fully recovered. There's hardly any around anymore. And that was done clearly. That clearly occurred during very, very heavy stretch, 2-week stretch of spraying. In fact, it was the first 3 days of that spraying stretch that they all died. Within 3 days, the whole colony died, with the exception of maybe just a few stragglers around. So I am convinced, because of those two events, that chemtrails are really, geoengineering is really the reason that we have the bee die-off, and the idea about the pesticide that affects them is really just a cover story. I think that's what's going on, personally.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. What about the fish in the oceans? Any take on that?
I have heard things about iron-feeding bacteria or certain bacteria that have been used in experiments as well, that actually thrive in the seawater. I don't know, but I'm not a biologist, so I don't know the details of this. But I've also heard about oxygen starvation under certain conditions that are induced by this. I don't know all the details. I don't have any personal conclusions that I can speak, strongly about. But we haven't seen this kind of thing. I mean, we've had fish die-offs, we've had seal die-offs, we've had. I mean, I was collecting stories. I stopped collecting them because they're so numerous. The animal die-offs that we've had, thousands of birds falling from the sky. White nose syndrome in Bangor, Maine. We've had the bats have white nose, and they're all, there's a fungus now because their immune systems are all suppressed. Well, of course, aluminum and barium both and mercury all suppress immune systems in mammals. So,
and
so
once
again, what's that?
And the starfish too. You heard about the starfish?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've done whale watches in the Bay of Fundy, which is about an hour and a half away from me, in Maine there, and I mean, it's beautiful. There's seahorses, and the starfish are huge. They're almost like a foot diameter in the Bay of Fundy. It's a real rugged, beautiful area, and I've seen whales out there. I've gone out there a couple times on a whale watch years ago. So it's unbelievable what's happening, and I just wish the public would wake up and become.
I agree. It's very sad, Russ. When I think about it, it's heartbreaking to see this happen on this planet. I love wildlife. I love nature, and to see it all just going to hell in a handbasket. It's just unbelievable, quite honestly.
It is. It's very distressing. And the thing is the public, I know it's hard. We're all being stressed. We're all being, we have to work 2 and 3 jobs. We're feeling fatigued because we're all being drugged and poisoned. It's really, really hard. But I'll tell you, unless we get involved and we put an end to this very quickly, it's going to just get tremendously worse, and it's going to get worse fast because these die-offs are continuing. And next is agriculture. We're losing our agriculture. We're losing our trees, and trees are breaking in half. White bark syndrome I mentioned in the last hour is occurring. We don't have a lot of time to mess around. We've got to solve this problem, or nothing else is going to matter.
I agree. I totally agree. It's global sabotage, and I do believe that they are going full speed ahead. I mean, they're not stopping, and I know they know what they're doing, like we've talked about earlier. I mean, they're well aware that this is a destructive course that they've taken, and I do think it has a lot to do with this new agenda and this quote-unquote New World Order, whatever they want to call themselves. But, yeah, it smells bad. The whole thing is unbelievable, And
I think what's going to happen, this all comes down to power and control. I think what's going to happen is people have heard about the seed vaults around the world where they store food seeds, plant seeds for agriculture, and they preserved all of these seeds. And I think I'll tell you what I think is going to happen is that they're destroying agriculture, they're destroying the soils, and you have also what is the lab? Brookhaven Labs that invented now a new method just not too many years ago, 10 years ago or so, for removing mercury from the soil. They basically take sulfur impregnated carbon rods, and they stick them in the soil, and the sulfur binds to the mercury, and they pull it out. What I think that is going to be part of what they're doing is they want to control everything. And so they're going to destroy the soils, which they're doing right now, and in the process destroy agriculture. And they will then come out with their technology saying we can save the soils from all of our nasty pollution. They're going to blame the people. They're going to say, oh, look, it's your fault, people. You It's manufacturing, and you should have been clean, and you should have not polluted the planet when it was them doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to break out their seed vaults, and then they're going to claim ownership to all of those seeds, to all of the plants that come from those seeds, and then they're going to literally control the agriculture. They're going to basically own the rights. Because you have, people see movies like Food Incorporated, you already see where GMOs are being used to take over farms, because when the GMO seeds get spread to farms that don't use the GMO seeds, those farms are being charged to pay royalties for having those plants grow on their farms.
Gee. Yeah.
And it's absolutely insane what is happening. So I think people keep your eyes open. I wish this wasn't going to happen, and I certainly hope it doesn't happen. I hope enough people wake up to stop it. But I think that's going to be the final step in their takeover of agriculture, is to break out their seed vaults and then claim ownership of all of the plants that come from those seeds, and they will literally own agriculture. They'll own everything. The entire food supply will be owned by them because they destroyed the cells. And then they will profit from the cleanup, because Brookhaven Labs will sell the patent to a corporation that is owned by one of the subsidiaries of the Rockefeller family or the Rothschilds family or one of these other families. And they will be given contracts by the governments of the world, multi-billion-dollar contracts to do, 50 years of soil cleanup, and they're just going to have more and more money that they make from the problem they cause. This is a business model, for those who don't know, called Machiavellianism. This is where you create a problem and then you profit from the solution. They've been doing this for decades, and that, I believe, is what we see happening right now.
I agree with you, Russ. That's really well said on that. Yeah, that's highly possible. And also, I think about the people in the underground, these underground base areas that are probably well protected to some extent, and if they were trying to do some kind of a mass extermination, maybe they don't care what happens at the ground level as long as they're, they have their own little organization underground. What's your impression of that?
Well, absolutely. I think that is their safe haven during all of the social turmoil that is going to take place probably not long from now, when the food supply is diminished and people start fighting each other, which is what they want. So they'll be in their underground bases. And people have to ask themselves, if you have, most of your audience is very savvy, I'm sure, about these subjects, but for those who aren't familiar, these large underground bases do have massive food supplies. They have their own air supplies. They have their own transportation system. This isn't a big secret. There are truckers who have been interviewed about this, bringing massive amounts of supplies, and that these underground facilities stretch for hundreds and hundreds of miles in some cases. Not the cities themselves, but the corridors that stretch between the cities. Mm-hmm. And they can house large numbers of people. And I think that's at least one of their safe havens that they have to survive through the turmoil, and so that they can emerge afterward and have even more control using the methods of, like I talked about a minute ago, about having ownership of agriculture and having, after reduced the world's population because of their destruction of the food supply, and that's part of it. They want to reduce world population.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's one of their goals. So yeah, I think the underground cities are very key, and we have to ask ourselves, why did they build these, and why are they semi-secret? They try to keep the secret. You never hear about them, and you would think, mainstream news would be all over this story, but, you just don't hear about it. But yet these things are well documented and pretty well known among those who want to do a little bit of research. Right,
yeah, and if you really look at the maps, they're all interconnected in the underground. They go from, state to state. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's truckers. I've seen, there's a famous video of a man who's interviewing a trucker who's driving into one of these things. He says, yeah, it stretches all the way, pretty much, they have corridors underground that go across the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Exactly. And not that the city is, but the corridors between the underground bases, the corridors are all connected.
Right.
Trucks drive right through the corridors, the commercial truckers bringing supplies in.
Exactly. So I'm wondering about the aquifers, too. They must have water supply, deep aquifers that's non-contaminated.
Oh, absolutely. Not only probably do they have aquifers, but I know that, or at least I would say I'm quite sure that the technology exists to remove nanoparticles or very, very small particles of aluminum, barium, mercury, and other things from water. So even if their water supply runs out, I'm sure that there's a way to do this. But they probably chelate the water. You can probably chelate the water just like you could chelate the air.
Exactly.
Well, there are industrial air filters that actually do that.
Yeah, I believe there are the good guys. There has to be good guys out there that are going to be helping us with this balance, because without people awakening and really taking some action, I think we're in a really dark corridor right now. So we need to kind of turn this around very quickly, as you have said. And also, I wanted to make sure that everybody gets your website one more time, and if they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. The website is globalskywatch.com. You can also find us on Facebook. We have 17,000 people in our Facebook group about geoengineering/chemtrails. It's called Chemtrails Global Skywatch. That is our Facebook group. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can just go to globalskywatch.com and click the Contact Us link in the upper menu. It's in the lower right portion of the menu at the top of the page. It's just called Contact Us. And there's an email address there, and you can send me an email if you'd like to contact me about any of these subjects. Awesome.
And you also do like a little radio show, don't you?
Yes, I'm doing an intermittent radio show on Monday nights. And if anybody wants to check that out, you can go to the Global Skywatch website. And at the top of the menu, there's a link called Global Skywatch Radio. And we've had everybody from Clifford Carnicom to George Barnes, who's the founder of the Skyder Alert app for phones. Matthias Honke, who is a guy from a Swiss man who is taking air samples. We've had Paul Mack, who's the leader of the Australian. Over 40 cities every month have demonstrations in Australia against chemtrails and geoengineering, and he heads that up. We've had just a lot of people. So, yeah, we do that on Monday nights. We've been doing it intermittently lately. But we've had even Clifford Carnicom on there. So if anybody wants to check out the archive or wants to join us on Monday nights, we will be picking it up again soon. Just come to globalskywatch.com and click the Global Skywatch radio link right there at the top.
Awesome. I've tuned into your show before, too, and I love it. It's great. And also, do you have any books coming out, Russ?
No, I haven't written any books. The problem that I have is my time is very constrained because I'm not a rich person. I work full-time. And in my spare time, I try to design and add to the Global Skywatch website, and I try to do my best to participate with the Global Skywatch Facebook group, which is very hard. We have some very dedicated administrators who are just awesome that have made this continue. It's been a group effort, and they've done a tremendous job, which they're the ones that have really made this happen. So with all of this stuff going on and trying to make a living, quite frankly, I just don't have time to do anything else.
Right. Well, I understand that. I mean, I think we're all in that same ballpark right now. What used to be an upper middle class to middle class has gone down the sewer, so to speak. But I do want to thank you so much, Russ, for being on tonight. It's always so important to have you on with your information and research, and I appreciate what you're doing and the information you're sharing with the audience. I know they appreciate it also. So I do look forward to having you back again, and you're always welcome to come back whenever you feel like you need to communicate something urgent. Make sure you give me a shout.
Thank you. Always my pleasure. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It's always a pleasure talking to you. You're just wonderful to talk to.
Yeah, likewise. I totally resonate with you, and I so appreciate your work. And I do want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. I hope you enjoyed the show. And also, please join me next week when my special guest will be Joanne Richards. And stay tuned for the awesome duo and show Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mickey coming up next to sell you on to the night. Of course, I didn't get to mention that last week because I got cut off. But anyways, did I just lose Russ? Where'd he go? You're still there, aren't you, Russ?
Yes.
Okay. For a second, I thought I lost you again. But we're getting ready to wrap this up in just a few minutes here. Do you have any closing statements or anything you wanted to relay that I didn't cover?
Well, the real important thing is I would encourage people to get involved. I want people to understand that you have power. The people who are committing these crimes against you are terrified that you're going to speak up. That is what absolutely terrifies them, which is why they're trying to keep this quiet, which is why they're not talking about this mainstream media. So people need to realize the power that they have and not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Stand up and express your power by telling your friends, your family, and your neighbors what is going on, and by encouraging your government and all of those people who are being sprayed right along with you, who work for government, who are the police, who are the judges, and who are the local officials in your area. Make them aware of what's going on as well. You have a tremendous amount of power. Don't be afraid.
I agree. Well said. And also, I have a quick question. We might run out of time, but I don't think so. But do you feel that the drones are also deploying chemtrails?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's a tough question. We don't really know for sure the answer, but the real scary thing is that if they're deploying chemtrails, and I believe that there's a certain type of chemtrail, and there's an article I wrote about that actually contains biologics into what gives people flu symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
The real scary thing is we're just one step away from them creating the pandemic at the moment that they wanted to, and they will probably be using drones to do that.
Mm-hmm. I get that too, and also the spraying aspect of just spraying anything into the atmosphere. And you make a good point too, that chemtrail flu they talk about,
yep,
which is pretty much like flu symptoms, except is it a respiratory infection?
Yes. It makes you feel like you have the flu. It's a type of chemtrail that I call the swamp water type. It actually tastes like a combination of algae and mushrooms. For those who can taste it, they will concur with me. And that is the particular type that after they spray that 3 or more days in a row, everybody's sick.
That's horrible. Well, Russ, I want to thank you so much for being on tonight. It's a pleasure, and you take care of yourself. I wish you well in all you do.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Russ. And thank you, everybody. I'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.